Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bullpen. All right, in the bullpen today, he's back, Shelley Wynter, dear friend, radio talk host extraordinaire. Just happens to be on the wrong political side. We try not to hold that against him too much. Shelley Wynter, good to have you, dear brother. How are you?
Wonderful, Rashad. Wonderful, wonderful.
All right. So I know you host this really, really popular conservative show on WSB. And the question is, why is it that those who are remaining in the GOP presidential race are so afraid to talk about race? They're afraid to talk against Trump. I understand that politically, as it still is a feckless leader, in my opinion, on either side. But why not be honest about racism in America? Why avoid that? Because if you avoid that part, you can't be trusted to affect remedies for it through policy if you ignore that it actually exists. So I think it's a relevant policy question.
I'll tell you why. Two reasons. One is political, and one is another reason. The first political reason is because Republicans, it's a Republican primary. There's no point in talking about race because at the highest end, only 12% of African Americans, quite honestly, are the only people really interested in having a discussion about race, are going to vote. And that's on the high end. That's if you won't probably get over 9% playing in a Republican primary. So that's one reason. Politically, it makes no sense because there's no audience for it. The second reason is, and this is something that I've come to learn, many Republicans are not comfortable talking about race. And the reason for that is because anything that they say about race is usually cherry picked for criticism by and large by the media. And so I think there's a hesitancy to speak about race for many Republicans. I have no problems talking about race because, of my background, my lived experiences, as you leftists like to call it. But I think that's really the main reason. The real question for me is why this is a three-person race right now. Haley, DeSantis, and Trump. Trump is going to run away with it, I believe. But the real question for me is why haven't the others dropped out by now? That's the real question. I'm less interested in the racial conversation with Republicans in a Republican primary.
Well, I definitely understand your point of view, but you were invited under the topical premise of discussing race.
Oh yeah, I know that. I was
inside. Right. No, I got you. I understand that, brother. You're not going to pivot from this, though.
No, I'm not.
So allow me to pose something that's interesting that you submitted here. One, the interest of speaking on race, you say, well, that's not really present. But really, GOP presidential candidates prior to the Trump era did talk about race relations in America during their debates. They did it in policy. George W. Bush did it as well, and to some degree of success with some of his messaging angles. But let me ask you this question. Now you have a GOP that literally runs away from it. It's not that they simply won't talk about it. They ignore it. And if they're ignoring an actual dysfunction, what we would all call a social dysfunction in America that adversely impacts human beings, leads to the death of some people, leads to unfair actions toward groups of individuals. If you're telling me, well, it's because one is not political and two, they're not comfortable, that means that does a disservice policy-wise to the greater whole of America. So while they may see cause and effect relationship toward Black individuals only, the reality is that cause and effect permeates beyond Black people in America because it creates the dysfunction and it permeates inside of the culture of workplace, academics, et cetera. And it is a policy dynamic at the end of the day, and they're running for a policy position.
I think everything that you just said, to be quite honest with you, and your brother, is completely caca, unadulterated caca.
How?
Every corporation has a DE&I specialist. I just did training.
That's not true.
listen, I just did training.
But that's not true. You just made a statement that's patently false. Every corporation does not have a DEI.
The vast majority of the Fortune 500 have DEI training, personnel, and et cetera. I just went through here at my company an entire 2-hour online training that we had to do to keep our jobs, essentially, on sexual harassment, racism, sexism, everything.
Well, so that's a legal liability issue.
Right, exactly. So whatever reason they're doing it. But the point I'm trying to make is, for many conservatives, particularly Republicans, they don't see this vast monster called racism that exists in our country today.
Let's just stop. You said,
can I answer your question, brother?
Yeah,
can I
at least speak to your commentary that what I said was.
I'm saying that you said this pandemic of racism that exists that kills some people.
I never said pandemic. Okay. I said racism has led to the death of individuals. You have talked about it on your program as well.
Right.
So everything I'm saying is true. What part of what I said was caca?
I'm telling you, what part of it is that many conservatives don't believe that this problem.
Why do I care what they believe when I?
Well, because you're asking them to talk about it.
Well, I'm posing.
You're asking them to talk about it. So they don't believe.
My statement is caca because they don't believe a fact.
They don't believe it exists.
They don't believe a fact. But I'm caca. They don't believe a fact.
No, they don't believe in the idea that it's ubiquitous. That it's everywhere. So that we even have to have.
That's not what I said to you.
You did say that.
No, I did not say it was everywhere. I did not say that.
What did you say it was?
I said it's real. It's a fact. It happened.
Yes.
It permeates inside of the culture. It's a policy issue.
Sexism happens. Fatism happens. Homophobia happens. And there's hatred in this country on various reasons.
But what makes my statement a fact, caca?
Because what you're saying is you're attacking a group of people. You took it back to
providing question.
You're attacking a group of people because you're tying it to Trump, and you said going back, Republicans used to talk about racism.
Wait a minute. They talked about it in the sense of policy, dear sir.
Right.
They actually created policy. Republicans actually signed off on legislation to create mandates for minority business inclusion inside of the federal government.
Right.
That's a policy.
So you don't need that anymore.
Policy dynamic.
Right. So you don't need it anymore.
Sir, understand my point.
But you don't need it anymore. If they
did
it,
I'm going to make my point, sir.
My point. You're not letting me make mine.
I'll let you respond. Okay. My point is really simple. We used to be able to have common sense conversations about things that were policy directives inside of our construct, regardless of if everybody in the party agreed with it or not. We still had the conversations. And for the most part, conservatives understood, we got some inequity issues here. Now, it seems as if the GOP, by and large, they ignore inequitable dynamics, including race, genderism, and the like. So why has that been now something they universally run away from today?
They have not. And so I just answered that question because they don't believe that there are these massive inequitable outcomes.
So when did that happen? When did they stop believing that?
Don't invite me on and then not let me answer.
When did they stop believing it, sir?
They stopped believing it when they passed the mandates, the programs, when they stopped it. Look, I don't know. 1947. I don't know, Rashad. I'm saying they stopped it when they saw the policies being passed.
Okay.
There's no point. My point to you right now is they're uncomfortable having a conversation. There's no political reason for them to have the conversation now during a Republican primary. Okay. I'm sure if Trump is the nominee and Biden's the nominee, that when they have their debate, that will be a focus of the debate. That race will be a focus of the debate.
Well, and not race, but policies to remedy racial
discrimination. Policies around racial discrimination, all of that. Whatever you want to spin it as, there will be a conversation.
How is that a spin? That's the actual job.
Because you already have policies against hatred, sir. You already have policies against hatred. That's all racism is. Racism is a policy against hatred. You already have it.
No, racism is not. Let me be clear with you about what racism is. Racism in the context of what we actually see in the culture is active discrimination. It's discriminatory bias.
By who?
Typically by those who are empowered to discriminate, such as a supervisor, a CEO, sometimes.
And so what happens when that person is racist toward? What happens when that person is racist? What happens when that person is racist towards their employee? 9 times out of 10, they either get fired or they get sued.
Sir, let me be.
I just went through the training.
Okay, I'm glad you went through the training.
And let me just say, this idea has already been fixed.
Big ups to WSB for doing that training. No, I'm going to make my point that you interrupted.
All right.
So you may want to proclaim, well, people get fired if they're racist. Racism or discrimination actually begins in the hiring process, not the firing process. But let me be very clear about AT&T, a story we just reported on today. A woman, 32 years, black female, she reports a note inside of a department. They confirm it's real. They confirm somebody threatened this woman. Somebody called her an N-word at AT&T. She's told work from home because it's a threat. You're mocking the fact that a black woman.
I'm just saying, man, this is absurd, Rashad.
It's absurd.
You're asking.
It's absurd. You just said
it's absurd.
If this happens, happens, then the person gets fired. Let me explain. Well, in AT&T's case, they fired the woman who reported it.
Right.
And she was there 32 years.
And so find her a great lawyer and let her sue AT&T. Here's my point, Rashad.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what's your point?
You're asking, understand where we started. You asked me to come on here to talk about why the GOP doesn't talk about race.
Right.
And your example of what they should be talking about is a lady at AT&T.
No, that's not my example of what they should be talking about. That was my example.
Can you let me finish my statement,
because of what you said? Well, you're not going to lie, dear sir, on my program.
I'm saying that's what you're
saying. So my example was a rebuttal to the BS you said about corporations firing everyone who's a racist.
Right, so they fired her. So now she's gonna sue. So that's what I said. They'll either get fired or they'll sue. So in this case, she's gonna sue. My point here is, what policy should the GOP be discussing with the Democrat on the other side of the aisle about this issue that makes a discussion about race and policy?
I'm very glad you actually brought the question to me.
Right.
Number one, this should be a very simple answer about policy remedy to eliminate discrimination inside of the workplace based on immutable quality. That is it. Dr. King stood for it. I stand for it. And if I listen to some of your commentaries,
what's the policy?
You also stand for it.
What's the policy?
Number one, the policy is equal pay for equal work. Number two, you have a policy that's anti-discriminatory in the hiring process by actually having an oversight to that hiring process so that you see patterns.
All of that is already in constitutional anti-discrimination.
No, it is not.
It's already in anti-discrimination law.
It is not enforceable given the statutory dynamics per state. Come on, Shelley.
But it's already on the books. Of course it's not enforceable. You know why it's not enforceable?
It's on the books. What books are you talking about there, brother? We have a constitution that's violated constantly.
You know why it's not
enforced.
You know why it's not enforceable? Because unless you're talking about a situation like this, where AT&T is going to be sued, and I may change my cell phone service to something else, T-Mobile or something, because of this story. The fact of the matter is, like sexism, like harassment, like any other thing else, it is hard to prove. In your situation, the story you talked about, it's easy to prove racism.
All right, so no.
It's easy to prove it. It's also easy to prove bad management. It's also easy to prove.
Shelley, I just want to respond. I appreciate we get the point. Now, what the government has jurisdiction to do, even outside of the statutory language, they have the jurisdiction to file suits against companies that have patterns of discrimination. They have the jurisdiction to look at your records based on discriminatory practices. Those are things that they have the right to do. Now, if Republicans are running for the highest position, the highest policy position in the land, and they're unwilling to talk about a policy dynamic that, according to the last Pew Research, has impacted 88% of black people in this nation. That is not a black thing, that's an American thing.
Right, fair enough. Let me say this to you.
All right.
Let the government
a little too tight, dear brother. You need to put that up in the back.
Yeah, let me tell you, I was gonna say something about the mustache, but I'll leave it alone. Well, let me
go ahead, Sean. Make a point, brother.
No, let me make my point. If government is allowed to to sue companies for something like that happened at AT&T, which is disgusting. I agree. I wish I was a lawyer. I'd take her case tomorrow, right? But if government is allowed to sue companies for that, I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. Big corporations are going to stop hiring African Americans.
Well, they're already allowed to. Like, they already have the power to. And even under the Obama administration, it was aggressive. But you know what happened under the Obama administration? For the first time, the discretion or the dissension between what white males will pay, what black males will pay, what white women will pay, black women will pay, it actually shortened the gap because they so you know the facts, right?
Yeah,
so
I do know. what corporations, if I was a CEO right now on your show of a Fortune 500, they will tell you that they're doing everything in their power. I see it every day here where I work.
Well,
they're doing everything.
Some of them are
being very good corporate and American leaders.
Everybody isn't, and that's the thing.
And AT&T is one. AT&T is a very good company, as one of the best companies to work for. They are probably doing very good too. I suspect that this happened at a level that's outside of AT&T corporate diversity efforts and all of that stuff.
Well, it may be outside of corporate in the sense of headquarters.
And now that people are talking about it, I'm sure something's going to work out
we'll
for this
see.
woman.
I
think something will. If
all
nothing
right,
else, worst case scenario, she takes $1 million payout and goes on with her life.
We'll bring you an update to that case, brother. I appreciate you being on the show. I'm getting a wrap-up signal from production.
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
God
sir.
bless you, Rashad.
God
Talk
bless
to you. Have a great weekend, my brother.
All right, you too, brother.
Yes,
Listen
sir. Sorry I got a little heated. My bad.
No, brother. It's all right, brother.